It's the MyMichelleLive podcast.
MyMichelleLive, SCI TECH TALK, taking the God story to a geeky place. Well, here's Michelle.
Hey, I'm glad you're hanging out with me. SCI TECH TALK today. This is December 1st, and it is Giving Tuesday. Not a typical year, right? Because we aren't all out and about and able to maybe give as we have before, but there are a lot of technical ways that we can make a difference. Today on SCI TECH TALK, we'll be talking about how technology is affecting the holidays, good, bad, and otherwise. We'll also be talking about ways that you can give, and on this Giving Tuesday.
SCI TECH TALK.
Thank you. Well, today, as we talk science and technology, we're getting into the holidays and looking for that deeper story. But man, sometimes technology and the holidays they can collide. They can do great things. We can Zoom with grandma over our Christmas dinner. We can even do a lot of shopping, and we are doing that. Did you know just how many billions of dollars we're going to be spending? And even though CNBC reports consumers are planning to spend just a little less than last year, we're still spending about $1,000. Can we always afford it? What are some of the trends? How are we compensating for the pandemic and shutdowns? And what can we do about it? Well, we have with us an attorney who practices bankruptcy and tax law. He's an expert in consumer spending and in, how we get ourselves in holes, and he is here to help. Written the book, IRS Problems, I Can Help. Well, he is here to help today, and that is Shawn Wright. Shawn, hey, happy holidays.
Hey, thanks. Happy holidays, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
This year may be a little bit different. We aren't doing, and sadly, not going out and doing a lot of the shopping in the small businesses. This last weekend was Small Business Saturday. We're doing a lot of online shopping, and it is supposed to be record-breaking because we're all home, and, that's all we have to do.
That's right. I mean, it's so easy to hop online and order something and know that within a day or two it's going to be at your doorstep. You don't have to get in the car and drive anywhere. So it does make it easy for us.
I know. I absolutely love it. As something comes in, I wrap it, put it under the tree. It's fairly easy. It really has made life a lot easier. But as we know, oftentimes with ease comes problems. We experienced that a lot, didn't we? When credit cards started replacing cash exchanges, we stopped seeing the credit card as, I have $150 in my wallet, and we started seeing it as, free money, whee! And so do we see some of that problem today with our online shopping and spending?
We absolutely do. I mean, to think about it, the credit card hasn't been with us all that long, only about 40 years. And they have gotten, it's kind of like the internet. I mean, it's come out of nowhere. The credit card, the concept of using credit cards and debit cards, and it just makes it so easy that a lot of us don't even carry much of anything in cash anymore. So you got to watch with ease, like you say. With ease can come temptation, and with temptation, we can kind of get lost in the weeds, so to speak, and sometimes we don't want to look to see how bad our finances might be. And I see folks like this coming into my office, and what happens is a lot of times they're very ashamed of their situations, but I try to help them to say, listen, let's try to do an analysis. Let's look to see where you stand, and get a credit report, not to look and see what their credit scores are, but I want to look and see, all right, these are the bills that you have, and these are your monthly payments. Are these things that you can still afford? And if not, then we need to have a plan of attack to try to overcome it.
Well, you know what I really like about talking to you, Shawn, is something that we try to look for on this program, and that's hope. Is there anyone who has ever gotten themselves in a hole that was impossible to get themselves out of?
Well, Michelle, this is a true story. I had a gentleman who called me up. He's another attorney, and he called me up and he said, "Listen, a friend of mine, college friend of mine, has unfortunately committed, attempted to commit suicide." I thought, "Oh my God, what happened?" And he said, "Well, the finances were totally overwhelming, and he attempted to take his life, but he failed. He did not pass. He did not die, and he's doing better now. But can you look at, can you talk to him over the phone to talk to him about these finances?" And so that afternoon, we got him on the phone. And Michelle, I'm not kidding, but within about 10 or 15 minutes, I was able to analyze the situation and tell him, "All right, this is the path we're going to take, because you do have good income." The gentleman had a job. It was a good job. It's just that the bills were so, they seemed to overwhelm him, and he had some student loans, and we're able to get him back on track with his student loans. And believe it or not, within not that long a period of time, his credit was soaring again, and his health was back in order. So yes, there are definitely things that can bring us hope and optimism. People that come in to say to me that, "Oh, my credit's going to be ruined forever." No, that's not the case. It's kind of like, all right, maybe after the holidays we're a little bit out of shape and we haven't been to the gym. Well, you can get back into shape. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like your credit score is the same thing. There are things that can be done to improve your credit, things that can be done to improve your overall financial situation with debts.
We'll talk more about what we can be doing during the holidays, some advice from the expert here. But as we're talking about the worst of the worst, when do people and should people think about bankruptcy, and when should they think about just a reconsolidation or different changes? What are our options? What should we think about? Can you give us insight?
Okay, so when you feel, when you're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, you're taking money from one credit card to pay your other credit cards. That's a warning sign, and we all know that that's not a good thing.
Mhm.
When you are contemplating taking out a retirement loan to pay your credit card bills, that's not a good sign either. Remember, those retirement funds are there for your retirement, and you want to save those as much as humanly possible. When you're paying your regular living expenses with credit cards, that's not a good sign. So those types of things are not good. And so what you need is a plan of attack. And so what I tell people is, come meet with me. There's no charge, and many attorneys that are like me around the country that will meet with folks, and I'm talking about bankruptcy attorneys. They'll meet with them, no charge, sit down, look at their finances, and now not everybody has to file bankruptcy, like you talked about. There are maybe repayment plans. There are legitimate agencies out there called Consumer Credit Counseling Services, CCCS, and they are legitimate, and they do offer payment plans, that to help you if you don't have a lot of debt, for example, but you're just struggling with your bills. Not everybody is a good candidate for bankruptcy, and I do turn people away. I tell them, "Listen, there's other options." I had somebody the other day who came in, and I said, "Well, listen, I think you should refinance your mortgage. I think you have equity there. You don't have a lot of debt." And the person went away thinking, "Okay, that's not a bad solution." That's what they wound up doing. So not everybody has the same situation. There's no one easy fix.
And I can see that. We all have our own unique individual issues that we're dealing with. But as we go into the holidays and as we talk about how technology can be one of those sucks that makes it a little too easy at a click of a button. We don't even have to go out and work anymore to shop for things. We can just sit there, and it's so easy. You know when it's really dangerous for me, Shawn, at night if I can't sleep, and I have got to stay away from because I'll buy silly things. I don't know if I'm just not quite awake, but there's other issues too where people are overcompensating for the lockdown. I may not be able to visit with grandkids or relatives, so I'm, maybe make up for it by buying them something lavish. So, how do we get into overspending spiral in the holiday season?
Well, it's tough right now too because if you're on a fixed income, you really want to be mindful of your credit card purchases. I do see a lot of senior citizens who come in and who have to wind up looking into bankruptcy, and so it's I think they get that way. It's basically out of love. I mean, they want to help out their kids or their grandkids, and they just get overextended. I think we really need to look at our budgets, and right now with the pandemic, a lot of people are laid off. A lot of people, their hours have been cut, or they're just waiting to get called back, and it's a tough time right now. So I think this is a unique year as we get into the holidays, and we really have to be very careful with our budgets to not go overboard. I don't know about you, Michelle, but we had, my kids were all home for the summer, and we had a lot of time just hanging out as a family. And so we started to go on hikes a lot, and we started to have family dinners, which before the pandemic we weren't doing as much, and we got a lot out of that, and it wasn't really that expensive. So there are some things that can be done, but it's tough when you're maybe a grandparent and you can't see those grandkids. That's the hard part.
Oh, isn't it? So, well, let's give some advice, some rules that we can put into place to keep us, as we get closer to the holiday season and our buying habits tend to go a little crazy. What can we do?
Well, I mean, I think knowing your situation is very important. Now, what I mean by that is if you're not really sure about all the bills that you have, go get a credit report. Now, how do you do that? The government has the free credit report that you can get once a year. There are 3 credit providers, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and download a free credit report. Jot them down and tell me, and write down what you have. Sometimes if you see it in writing, it helps. The next thing is, maybe just telling yourself, all right, I just need to get through the next 6 months. I need to get, until the next 6 or 8 months until we can get through this pandemic. It's going to be hard because everybody has their own issues with respect to working and so on right now that, we just don't know. So many people are on unemployment or cutbacks, and it's a very difficult time right now. It's unique.
Yes, it is a difficult time. There's a lot of folks who don't have much of an income, a lot of people who have lost their jobs. So when people are dealing with that money crunch, what advice do you give them?
Well, there are programs out there. I have a lot of my clients who owe money to the IRS. We've put them into suspension programs so that they don't have to make their IRS payments right now. This is if they owe back taxes. And similarly, some of my clients are doing that with their mortgages as well. It depends on each bank, for example, each mortgage company as to what sort of program they'll have. Other people are doing mortgage modifications. I would say it's a little bit harder to do that with car loans. Credit card companies may be willing to suspend payments as well for a few months, but they're not going to table them forever. So you just have to be mindful. You have to call your creditors individually and talk to them and see what they say and then work within the boundaries. But I know the IRS and also state taxing bodies are going to be pretty good, as well as student loan companies. student loan payments can sometimes be abated as well.
Shawn Wright has written the book IRS Problems, I Can Help. So if that's you and you want some more help, you can find more information, ShawnWrightLaw.com, and look up the book, IRS Problems, I Can Help. Shawn Wright has been our guest. Happy holidays, and thanks so much for your time. I mean, taking this time.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Man, it means a lot for those of us who may be struggling this year to have someone like you on our side, hearing you on the air in a personal interview. You know, you've helped people today. God bless you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Have a great day, and thanks for having me on.
Happy holidays.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Hey, ready to geek out? I've invited,
Absolutely.
yeah, let's do it. I've invited well, I could say he's a geeky friend because, man, his latest book, Breaking Yesterday, geeks us out. Today we're talking about science and technology and even the holidays, and I am so delighted to have friend and author Brent Baker. Welcome.
Thanks, Michelle. Really fun to be here.
Oh, yeah, and we're just getting started. Your book, Breaking Yesterday, it's a pretty imaginative, time-traveling romp. It is technology that drives the story that you create in your brain is fiction, but this is the crazy thing. We're living it out today. Yesterday's imagination is today's reality. I mean, that's just the truth of it. So I've asked you to talk about where we've come from with technology, where we're going. I think the holidays, Brent, are a pretty good measurement for where we've come from, where we're going, because tradition is such an integral part, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. And then this holiday season, especially. I mean, when you look at everything that's going on with the virus and with lockdowns and all that sort of stuff, we're really dependent on technology in a way we've never been before. And in a lot of ways, that's been good. I mean, look at us. We're 300 miles apart, and we're able to do this. But I also think the technology has shaped the response to the virus and maybe how we look at the holidays in ways that 30 years ago, the response would have been completely different. We wouldn't have had this. And so, like anything, it kind of becomes a crutch, I think, too.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I wanted to set the stage. Brent has written a book, Breaking Yesterday, and it's a imaginative time traveling tale of folks being sent back in time to kill the baby Jesus. So all of this faith stuff doesn't even have to happen. It is really well written, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we chat with Brent Baker today. But Brent, how, in your opinion, has technology changed the holidays?
I'm not sure if it's changed it maybe specifically on its own, but I think in the context of how Christmas has changed probably in the last 80, 90 years, as far as its commercialization. Every year you have the new gadget, the new toy that becomes the new gift that everybody runs to the store or now runs online to buy. So I think it's been part and parcel of changing the focus away from the birth of Christ to what you can get or what you can give, which really doesn't require a faith component.
But it doesn't require technology because we can do that if we can do that.
You can do that with anything. Yeah.
We know back in the day we had Christmas without cell phones and maybe dating ourselves a little bit, right? So those things can be a distraction. So let's talk about that's kind of fun, isn't it? What are some of the techie stuff you wanted for Christmas back in the day?
Well, one of my lifelong loves has been astronomy. So I've had a telescope since I was 8 or 9 years old, but I can remember being about 12 and looking in my astronomy magazines and like, oh my gosh, there's telescopes that have like clock drives, so you can aim it up at the moon or the planets, and it will compensate for the Earth's rotation, so you won't have things floating out of your field of view. So lo and behold, I upgraded my telescope situation, but then it was like, oh, you can take pictures through your telescope. So then it was all the attachments and the cameras and at the time film. And of course, for film, you need a dark room, right? So the chemicals and the enlarger and the red light for the bathroom and then refitting the bathroom to turn it into a dark room.
And then where do your kids go, right? Yeah. Oh, your parents, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny. And back in the day, I was pretty excited to spend, I don't know, $1,000 on a G8 Canon camera. And now that thing is just a joke. It's like a child's plaything. My phone, this phone has more technology and takes better pictures than that. So technology changes, and it's kind of like a suck in a way. But some of my favorite gifts, my favorite gift of all time, really didn't have a whole lot of technology, but like when I was a kid. What's yours? I'll tell you my story if you tell me yours. What's your favorite gift of all time?
Here's where we're gonna have to do some editing. We have to think about that one.
Okay, I'll tell you mine.
Okay, you go first.
I was so excited to get this 64 pack of felt tip pens that you could draw with in all these colors. But now they had some very minor technology they had sent to them. Now that I think back, that scent was probably toxic, but I loved those things. The dark kind of winter green smelled like winter mint, and the red smelled like strawberry. I love those things. I drew pictures all the time. I'm kind of creative, very low tech. It wasn't the flashy things that got me, and I still remember that to this day.
So this is actually just a couple of years ago, not even as a kid, but it actually kind of speaks to that point. I discovered, and it's something I gave more than, although it was a gift for myself too. I found some old reel-to-reel tapes, a whole pile of them.
And for those of you millennial age and younger, what are those?
So even pre-8 track. Okay, so these things were from the 60s and 70s. Well, they were probably 4-inch reels, and you had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. But anyway,
right.
So the story behind this was that my grandmother, my mom's mom, had multiple sclerosis and was paralyzed, and so when we moved, my mom, instead of writing letters to her, would record letters and record my sister and me as little kids, and we'd send them to grandma. And then she and my grandpa would then like send these audio letters back. So I had this big pile of all of these reel-to-reel tapes and nothing to play them on. And fortunately, there is this thing called eBay still, and I was able to find actually the exact same model of the tape player and recorder that we used to have. So I was able to go through. I didn't even finish them all, but I went through and recorded a bunch of these and digitized them, and gave them out to our family. But I just remember listening to these and listening to the voice of my grandmother and a 4-year-old me, and my young mom. When we had moved across the country to New Jersey, and talking about all the changes our family was going through. So technology made this possible to make it so we could hear them again. But in a way, it was such a simple thing from way back when.
It wasn't technology that made that story precious, though. It wasn't the technology. Exactly. It was the story behind it. And that makes me think of why we've seen a lot of tales on movies at Christmas time about saving Christmas, and technology is there to help, right? The latest
Right.
Christmas Chronicles 2 has Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. I just watched it this week and I liked it. I really did. One of those goofy Christmas movies. Totally loved it. There were devices to harness, steal, and even return the Star of David, and the other movies that follow suit where they get the upgrade to the North Pole. We can use technology to cook turkeys, to connect with family across the world, or to hear the voice of someone who's no longer with us. And your story that just touched my heart. So there's a lot of good that technology can bring us at the holidays.
It's a great tool, but as with anything else in human nature, it can be very addictive, and it makes a terrible master. And I find it so often. It's weird. I got my phone sitting right here, and even I can feel it like pulling me. Even as we're sitting here talking, it's like, oh, if a notification pops up, bingo, I got to check out what's on the phone, right? Sometimes
Don't you dare do that. Wait, don't you dare do that during this interview. Don't do it, Brent. Don't do it.
I can reach forward even just to see if there's a notification, like for no reason, so it's a small, but like a daily thing for almost everybody. It's like the tech is wonderful, but it's turned into something that has harnessed us more than the other way around.
Well, that can be true, but my goodness, during this crazy time in history, if we didn't have technology, many of us couldn't work from home. We wouldn't be able to connect with family. You and I are both in the northwest corner of the United States here, and in our world, our governor has locked things down. He even wanted people to get tested before you go to grandma's house for Thanksgiving, to show up. See, I've got my test within 48 hours. Please let me in. I need the turkey, right? I mean, it's pretty
Right.
almost draconian up here. If we did not have technology, the holidays might be a little bleaker.
That's very true. But I also wonder how much the technology has shaped the way the government has put some of these things into place. Like if you knew that when you did a lockdown that people would not be able to communicate at all with each other except maybe over the phone, nobody could work from home. I wonder how the response would have been 30 years ago, because I think even as we've seen a lot of social pressure and a lot of unrest and mental illness and everything, I think it would have come out even maybe more violently 30 years ago than it does now, because we'd even have less opportunity to connect this way. We'd be forced into person-to-person contact even more than we feel like we need it now. So,
okay, as you're listening.
hard to say, chicken or egg thing.
Yeah, think about that. Let that swirl around your head for a moment. Because in your book, Breaking Yesterday, technology without moral restraint, just kind of it was a central theme to the story of Breaking Yesterday. Which is actually kind of a Christmas story, by the way, as we get into the holiday season.
Kind of like Die Hard's a Christmas movie, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And there's people in my family who would argue, yes, it is. Its main plot is an entity sending people back through time to kill the baby Jesus. And we're not dealing with that kind of maniacal technology under our tree, let's hope. But let's hope. But what's some technology that should come with warning signals?
I think anytime something really new is introduced, we always should approach it with a little bit of caution, because I think that we get excited about the positive uses.
Always, because it's always because of positive uses for the most part, unless you're talking about the government or the Pentagon using it to wipe out all life as we know it. Other than that, it's usually for good purposes, and even that might start out with a lovely thought of world peace. I don't know. I'm reaching.
Yeah,
I'm reaching.
I think that one thing, the technology itself is going to be neutral. It's the human element that's always going to be the problem. And so usually something gets invented, and then someone, say the Department of Defense or the government or your maniacal mad scientist who's having seances, for instance, oh, we can use this technology to accomplish this. I think one thing that I've read about in the last year, good old Elon Musk is talking about these chips that can allow your brain to communicate with computers. And my first thought is, what could possibly go wrong with that?
Because you're a science fiction writer. And what is wrong with these people that they don't watch science fiction? Because we've seen these things before, haven't we?
Right. It's not like, say, in the 40s or 50s where there wasn't nearly as much science fiction floating around, to project all of the bad things that could possibly happen with all the good things in life, right? So,
it's right.
Dystopian science fiction was not a thing.
and that's creepy. But as we look at getting a worldwide vaccine, where we may not be able to travel now, according to some airlines, unless you have proof of the vaccine, where maybe we might get to the place where we can't buy, sell, or trade unless we've had the vaccine. It's edging on something of biblical proportions. Even the invention of patent number 666 that can put,
of course, right.
Yeah, I know, right? That can put information on a disc, not a disc, but a little something like the size of the head of a pin under your skin that can give information so people can know that you've been vaccinated, and we can have all your information there and know that you're safe for the good of mankind. And we look at that if we've watched science fiction, or if we, I don't know, read the Bible and go, okay, this is weird.
Yeah, and both between science fiction and the Bible, and even just, again, watching how technology gets used and abused in our society, and even sometimes not with the intent of the users of the technology. I guess an example from our own state would be just a few months ago with our unemployment security system. So unemployment help for people who've lost their jobs. Typically that's a good thing, but the system got hacked by Nigerian computer pros, and hundreds of millions of dollars went to aid Nigerian hackers rather than unemployed Washington workers.
And how do they need more money anyway? Because I mean, they all of my rich uncles live there. I just
right. And this wasn't even a scam, right? This was them getting into our computer system. So even if the legitimate users of the technology are using it properly, I've yet to see technology that can't be abused or hacked into or otherwise misused by others that have other ideas.
Yeah, well,
I mean, even go back to our day, watching that old Matthew Broderick movie, War Games, and Ali Sheedy. You have a computer to control the nuclear missiles so that humans don't make a bad mistake. And the next thing you know, you've got a 15-year-old kid hacking into the system, thinking he's playing a game and nearly destroying the world. And I don't think we've really, human nature hasn't changed. We're still where that kind of thing can happen.
Okay. And the scary thing about that is that if you think of technology, all that we can accomplish, if there is no God, we are kind of left to our own devices, and we become God, as it were. That's why we really need to bring it to what we do on the My Michelle Live podcast. We bring it back to the God story. And if you're new to My Michelle Live or any of my broadcasts, this is what we look for. If there's a God, can we see signs of him, any evidence of him? And what does he expect of us? Okay, man in itself, one of the descriptions in your book and the imagery and the use of, it's sci-fi, right? It's a science fiction book, but you use such poetic words and wonderful ways of putting things together that it just draws you in. There's this description in your book of this, of man, of us, and this is what it says from your book. Hydrogen, and I'm reading it here, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, calcium, a plethora of miscellaneous elements. You are literally mud, dirt, water, and some pitifully weak electrochemical process. A sack of dirt on a backwater planet in a vast universe that could not hear your whiny squeals even if it cared to. Merry Christmas. Ouch, right? but that is in essence what we're told is the science of it all. But here is the kicker. The Bible, in contrast, says that we are fearfully. You are not mud. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. So let's get into the real science, Brent Baker.
Well, actually, if you look back in Genesis, what does it say that God created us from?
Well, dirt, we're mud.
Right.
Okay, you're right.
So yes, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think the thing is both. And I think that's where the lie comes in, is that, I mean, most lies are partial truths, right? So yes, our body is made of elements of dirt. And
think of the wonder of that, though.
I know it is. We're not just a sack of mud thrown together randomly. We're designed, and in the image of God. I mean, however this works, I mean, the Bible isn't a cookbook. It's not going to tell you how to create a life form, but somehow God breathed the image of himself into what amounts to a sack of dirt, right? But it was designed to work in a small way, the way God works. And so it's the sort of the wonder of how it all fits together between these simple elements, which aren't really probably that simple if you're a chemist, but
right, and that gets into it.
But then where does life come from? How does a chemical process mean that we can even imagine these things and then communicate them to one another over these wonders of technology that we've invented, but pale in comparison to the creation of life? It's so, when I have these imaginative wanderings, it's like, okay, so God did this. We can't conceive of how it even can happen, even though we try to put it all together. And yet there's an enemy out there that is going to use half-truths to use this against us. So can tell you, you're just a sack of dirt. Well, okay, so I'm made of the same stuff. I'm made from dirt, but that doesn't mean that I'm only worth dirt. I am something that has infinite value because God breathed life into me that only he can do.
And let us just kind of parse through some of those lies. It seems like we can play on the simplicity of man, this what we don't know, and say you're just dirt. Just dirt, dudes. We dig through the dirt to find precious things that are worth a lot. Let's talk about that. You mentioned, to a chemist, these chemical makeups, they're not and not nothing. There's right. Something to them. When you look at the extraordinary process that we are, these living, breathing, I guess, intelligent life forms that walk around self-sufficient. We put in energy, we expel waste, we are able to exist independently, to think, the makeup of our eyes, the miraculous nature of our bodies to heal themselves, which kind of goes against the second law of thermodynamics, where everything breaks down. Yes, we do break down, but yet our bodies are made to heal. The recycling nature of water on our planet, the way everything is interconnected, and the entire cosmos, if they weren't positioned the way they are, we wouldn't even exist. The chances of life on this planet are so extraordinary, and even creating something from nothing or dirt. We have the Large Hadron Collider, which we talked about recently on our podcast, Brent, that is 13 miles long and billions of dollars to try to find out and create what happened in the first milliseconds of life, and we're still not quite there because what we have here is so miraculous, and that is the real science. You're made of dirt, you're a sack of dirt, and that is extraordinary. I mean, I made mud pies when I was a kid. Nothing walked out of that.
They didn't get up and walk around. Didn't talk back at you.
See, you see what I mean? So that's the real science. Sometimes it's not technology or trials that seem to that seem to separate us from the love of God. And I wanted to talk about that because God, if we have a God that created us, if we have an extraordinary God that's able to make a human mind that can rival, more than rival, the most advanced technology, but put it to shame, then it makes us look like mud pies in comparison, right? But in your book, there's a theme that's pretty important to Breaking Yesterday, and that's what can separate us from God's love? What can separate us from this knowledge that we are fearfully and wonderfully made? What can separate us from the real truth, the real science, and the love of God? Sometimes it can seem an insurmountable thing to even understand God. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I hope so, because if we could fully understand God, we've just sort of recreated God as a big human being. So he is different than we are. I mean, we're made in his image, but there's so much more, an image versus a three-dimensional thing. They're so different. I mean, the Bible says nothing can separate us from the love of God, but we also have the choice to turn around and walk away. And ultimately, and you see it throughout the book, we have choices, and we have things that we choose to believe, and those, as with humans, those choices can disrupt the relationship that we have with God. And so I think when you ignore your spouse or ignore your friends, you put a strain on the relationship. Or if you do something that is purely out of selfishness, I don't think we can harm God the way we can harm another human being. But I think that we've seen that God has the template for human emotions, and so.
Or God emotions,
sense,
and we have
right.
emotions like God does.
We say,
yeah,
right. We see God angry. We see God sad. We know that heaven mourned on the execution of Christ. So I lost my train of thought.
That's my bad. I did that to you. Yeah. I did that. I was all into what you were saying. But the bigger point really is that we separate ourselves. But God's not separating us. It's as though we allow things to get in the way like we do in human relationships, but we don't even realize that God hasn't changed. He hasn't gone anywhere.
Right. That's a key thing to remember. And it actually kind of plays into this whole concept of trying to understand how time works and how eternity works. God does not change, partly because he's eternal and he's not like subject to a timeline the way we are. I mean, he created this time that we exist in. So his character is a constant, partly because, I mean, the key is in his name, I am, right? From all the way back to Moses, I am. And so that's sort of a statement that everything is now. I am who I am. It's not even who I was and who I will be. It's just like
I am.
Through all, I am.
This is it. I like it.
So he's not going to change it. He's not going to change his mind. I mean, there's some ways that the Old Testament works. There are some of the writings of the Old Testament that maybe are different than where we've come to understand things in the New Testament, thanks to Christ. Um, but God is a constant, and God's ultimately the constant. I like to say, and I probably stole it from Augustine or someone, that the Bible is God's written word, but nature reveals God's fingerprints. They both require interpretation. They both take a lot of study and understanding, and they both can be misread and misunderstood and abused.
Okay.
The human element, biblical interpretation, how we see nature and how we use it, equally subject to our whims.
I think
so
that's well put.
What we do can distance us from God, but nothing outside of God is going to come in and separate us from him.
Right. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. You quote that in your book, angels, devils, things present, things to come, the coronavirus. Okay, that's not actually in the Bible, but if you were to write a translation in 2020, it might say that. Nothing can separate us from the love of God through Christ Jesus. God is not going anywhere. It just seems that a lot of things can distract us. Technology in particular can be one of those things, but there's any number of things that can separate us. But one thing that I wanted to get to that is an important part of some of the characters in the book Breaking Yesterday is not so much the broken relationship with God, but one thing that keeps a lot of us seemingly separated from God, and that is God's people. They can be difficult. And you saw in very real ways, fictional characters that had their world and tremendous hurt played out from issues that came from people of God doing the godly thing and judging others. And it seems that we have a lot of brokenness that comes from God's people.
I think the first thing is, when we have this discussion, is to remind ourselves that God's people are still people.
End of story. Drop the mic. Move on.
Yeah. So we're still subject to the same problems that those who have no relationship with God are subject to. And we can have the same kinds of thoughts and take the same kinds of actions, usually because we've turned our back on that relationship with God in some way. Maybe not completely, but daily I find something, So it only highlights how much we need God. But I think the other part of it is, in Romans, it talks about how we are to allow God to transform our thinking, transform our mind. I mean, I think the Greek word is metanoia, which we often talk about as repentance, but it really has to do with
I get smart people on our show to talk Greek. Talk Greek to me.
I'm not that. I probably stole that from someone else, but but it's we talk about repentance, but it really is like changing your entire way of seeing the world to match the way God sees it. But that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, except by sometimes miraculous intervention. So we see that play out in the church. We see that play out in relationships where maybe we know God, but we haven't embraced the way that he wants us to live. And unfortunately, that kind of like builds on itself. Someone does something to me, I do something to you, relationship's broken, I get bitter, you don't forgive me. So now, obviously, some of the things that happen in the book are a little more extreme. The only ones that are like based in like something actually happened are a couple of like historical events. I go back at one point, sort of a test run for the time travel to a point in the Inquisition where people are being tortured over some pretty, I don't know, not things that we look at as being significant today. And that actually was like taken from an historical account of what an Inquisition was like. So all throughout history, people in the church have behaved like people do.
Well, who killed Jesus? I mean, in the end,
Right.
not the baby Jesus, and not in your book, but in reality, it was the Pharisees. It was the religious people, and that's part of the reality of what the world is like. But God always calls a remnant, people who just walk and look like. Maybe he does, a little bit more like he does. That was another central part of the conclusion of your book is people imperfect people that sometimes do the wrong things, use the wrong language, have made the wrong decision. But when they walk a little bit more like God, it really makes a difference. And sometimes the very things that we depend on in technology are things that can distract us. Sometimes the very things that we depend on, our religion, can distract us. There can be a lot of distraction, but I wanted to bring it home. We may need to get back to the most important things, hearing God's voice. You refer to the voice of God in your book as something that has stayed with me, and I think about every day since I read it. The voice. It was a whisper of thunder. I lingered on that. A whisper of thunder. That's how you describe just the inner voice of God when you have a relationship with him. Have you ever heard God? And what do you think God wants us to hear this holiday season?
There have been a couple times in my life where that is how I would describe hearing. Hearing, not not with headphones or my ears, but hearing the voice of God. And it's just something that is unmistakable.
Yeah.
When it has happened. And it's hard to describe. I mean, I could tell the story, but I don't know if we have that long. but I think, often the stuff that is the clamor, whether it be the distractions of technology, the distractions of some of our holiday traditions, all that's going around us, that's the stuff that can drown out, what in the Bible is described as the still small voice. It's a still small voice, but it is powerful. And so to me, it's unmistakable, but it also is really easy to get out of whack where I'm not paying attention and can miss that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one of the things this Christmas that could be a powerful way that God uses this time that we're going through is that attachment to so many traditions that we have, that there's nothing wrong with them, but they often become the point, and they often become where all of our energy goes. The children's program at church, getting all the decorations up, all the preparations for all the people and coming and going. And a lot of that for most of us won't be happening this year. But that not only does that not take away from what Christmas is, but I think this is an opportunity to focus on the birth of Christ and its eternal significance beyond all the ins and outs of what are going on in our world today. That's something that overrides all of that, no matter how bad our time in this world can get. Some of us listening to this might have people that are sick, may have lost people to the virus or to other reasons, but what Jesus brings us is eternal and beyond all of that.
That's right.
Doesn't ignore that, but focusing on that eternal kingdom, I think, is really important in this day and age, especially. And I think this Christmas is a time when we can really do that, because a lot of the things that distract us won't be there to distract us this time.
We've been talking with Brent R Baker. He is the author of a book that will be coming out early next year called Breaking Yesterday. And as we go into the holiday season talking about technology, it's a sci-fi book. The technology in there is crazy cool and interesting. The book is really well written, and it's such a delight. So I'll be looking forward to, and we'll be talking more with Brent, because you'll come back on and we'll talk again as the book does come out. Brent, people can get in touch with you and find out a little bit more about the progress where?
My website is BrentRBaker.com. I'm on Facebook, Brent R Baker.
Oh, now in this part of the program, we share with you some news, and usually some Geek Beat news.
'Cause I'm a geeky girl.
Geek Beat News.
'Cause I'm a geeky girl.
So I like Geek Beat news, that's right. But what we're doing is just a little bit different. This is what is called Giving Tuesday.
Do something that means something to you. Giving Tuesday is about doing something for them. Give your time. Give some money. Donate something. Giving Tuesday. One day to make a world of difference.
Now, speaking of technology, you can find all kinds of ways to give, and more about Giving Tuesday just using the hashtag Giving Tuesday. It is a day of activism. It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, celebrated in the United States, and it's a global day of generosity, a movement unleashing the power of people and organizations to transform their communities and their world. And I wanted to give you some folks that you can focus on. First, Samaritan's Purse. It's a big deal this time of the year. You may have heard of Operation Christmas Child or seen shoe boxes. After sharing the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." And that's the mission of Samaritan's Purse, to follow the example of Christ by helping those in need and proclaiming the hope of the gospel. For me, the story of the Good Samaritan from, let's say, Luke 10, it talks about a guy who helped someone who normally he didn't like. You talk about racial tensions and divisions. Well, this isn't the first time in history that happened. And this Samaritan helped a Jew who normally they wouldn't even touch each other. Many people just walked past him. Many people that were like him that should have helped. That is, to me, the bigger picture of helping people that you may not understand or that you might not otherwise be drawn to, whatever it may be, but who doesn't have a heart for children. So you can actually build a shoebox. And here on the page of if you go to MyMichelleLive, you can find a link to Samaritan Purse. You can also go to SamaritanPurse.org right now and build a shoebox / Operation Christmas Child. So build a shoebox, help a child who's in great need find great joy.
3, 2, 1.
At the count of 3, when children open the shoe boxes, they're so excited.
Those faces just transform.
Yeah, these kids behind me are so excited because they've just received their boxes.
The mouth is wide open, the voice is raised, smiles are all over. That box brings joy.
Some of them go by train, some go by camels, some go by ships. These boxes go all over the world. I would like to ask you to consider packing shoe boxes, and God will use your gift to touch the life of a child and to be able to do it in Jesus' name. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. God bless each and every one of you.
After those boxes are shipped, people in the area distribute them and share the gospel and share love with children as they distribute them. And as a result, families are reached, churches are started, communities are transformed, and it begins with you packing a shoebox today. So you can start building a shoebox. I'm building one today on this Giving Tuesday, and you can do one with me. Just click the link or go to SamaritanPurse.com for more information. Another organization that gives in a different way is Bible League. It seems like, why would you give just hand out a bunch of Bibles? Earlier this year, I traveled with Bible League to Indonesia, and I saw firsthand the difference that the Bible makes in the community, where people are hurting and suffering, where there's great persecution. I was at a church on a Sunday morning up in the jungly mountains. It was in Pasaban on the island of Java. There's 17,000 islands in Indonesia, and I was on one of the main ones, but out in a remote area where this church had been burnt down, destroyed, dismantled, vandalized 7 times or more. And so they made what used to be this building into a fruit stand on Sunday mornings to justify cars and people coming and going. But behind the church, on this red dirt mountain path, you walk up to a glorified picnic pavilion, a carport really, with a wooden floor where people sat and worshiped Sunday morning. It was amazing to see these folks who have been beaten, some of them persecuted, hospitalized, but have such hope. And I was watching before my eyes the people at different stages from the community who are coming to faith and changing their mindsets and finding a joy that they couldn't explain before, and answers to everyday problems, because it's all there in black and white in the Bible. Bible League does more than just hand out Bibles on the street corner and go, yay, here, free for all. What they really do is take people, train them in the Word, teach them the Word, teach them how to read, interpret, and even share and teach themselves. And then after they go through this training, their graduation gift is a Bible. For the persecuted church, it's a lifeline to the rest of us, and saying that, you may be rejected by your community, your family, those who you've been closest to, but you are not rejected by God's family. We're here for you. And the way they treat those Bibles, they're like precious children that they just don't let go of. Bible League is one of those places I would encourage you, if this is where your heart leads, to give on this Giving Tuesday. You can go to BibleLeague.org, click on the button that says donate, and let them know you heard it from MyMichelleLive.com. As we talk about Giving Tuesday today, do you realize $1.97 billion was raised worldwide last year in 2019, more than 500 million raised in the United States alone. ChristianPost.com has an article out today, 6 organizations that are matching donations for Giving Tuesday. One organization that I've worked with in the past on radio is Orphan Relief and Rescue. That is an organization that was started in my own backyard here in the greater Seattle area where I broadcast from. But what's amazing about Orphan Relief and Rescue is that they literally rescue children from trafficking, help to repatriate them in their communities and even with their families. And it is so making a difference. They are really literally saving lives. They never turn down a child, and they just trust that God is going to provide for them. They're amazing. But what's amazing is they do what multi-million-dollar organizations do on so much less, like $100,000 or less a year. I mean, just incredible what they can do. So that's another one of my favorites. OrphanReliefandRescue.org is where you go. You can sponsor a child, you can give, and please let them know that you heard it from MyMichelleLive.com, just to let them know that we care together. I want to thank you for being part of the program today on this Giving Tuesday, learning how technology can be a bear, and it can get in the way, and it can be ugly and messy and even dangerous, but it can also be used for great good. Let's use it for good today. Thank you for being part of the show.
More SCI Tech Talk at MyMichelleLive.com.